The Dawn Age. This era goes way back, about 12,000 years before Aegon's conquest. The land wasn't called Westeros yet, but it was already home to the children of the forest and the giants. The children weren't really human. They were small, dark-skinned, with big eyes, and they lived deep in the woods. They were deeply tied to nature, using magic tied to the weirwood trees, and they didn't build cities or castles. Instead, they carved faces into the weirwoods, believing these trees held the old gods' power. Then came the giants. These massive beings were up in the north, shaggy and towering over men, living in caves and herding mammoths. They weren't particularly sophisticated, but they were fierce and strong. For thousands of years, the children and the giants shared the land without much trouble, each sticking to their own ways. But everything changed when the first men arrived. The first men crossed the land bridge from Essos, called the Arm of Dorne, carrying bronze weapons and horses. They came not as peaceful settlers but conquerors, chopping down weirwood trees and burning the sacred groves. This sparked a brutal and long-lasting war with the children. The fighting stretched across centuries, with the first men using their numbers and metal weapons, while the children relied on guerrilla tactics and magic, like calling down the Hammer of Waters to break the Arm of Dorne and flood the neck, trying to stop the human advance. But even with magic, the children couldn't stop the first men entirely. The first men spread across Westeros, building holdfasts and farming the land. Eventually, though, both sides realized constant war wasn't sustainable. That's when they struck the famous pact. The first men would keep the open lands and plains, while the children would hold the forests. The signing of the pact was done on the Isle of Faces, where the weirwoods stand, and the Green Men watched over the agreement. This peace agreement marked the end of the Dawn Age and began the Age of Heroes. With peace, the first men took on the children's religion, worshipping the old gods at the heart trees, and the children taught them some of their ways. While the giants weren't part of the pact, they were pushed further into the north and became more isolated over time. The Dawn Age is where the deep magic of Westeros took root. Many of the ancient spells, the connection between the Greenseers and the Weirwoods, and the idea of the land's memory come from this time. It shaped the entire foundation of Westeros, setting up everything that would follow. Even though the Dawn Age ended, the echoes of that time still ripple through the series. It's fascinating to look back and see how this mythic era laid the groundwork for the later conflicts, characters, and houses that dominate the Game of Thrones universe. The Age of Heroes. This era kicked off about 10,000 years before Aegon's conquest and stretched for thousands of years, packed with legendary names and huge events. After the pact ended the wars between the first men and the children of the forest, Westeros settled into a period where heroes and myths were born. These weren't just campfire tales, they shaped the entire landscape of the continent. Bran the Builder stands out as one of the most famous figures. He's credited with building some of the greatest structures in Westeros, including Winterfell, and most importantly, the Wall. With help from the giants and magic from the children, Bran supposedly raised the wall after the Long Night to keep out the White Walkers and whatever other nightmares lurked in the far north. And not just a little fence either. This was a massive wall of ice stretching 300 miles long and 700 feet tall. Then there's Lann the Clever, the trickster behind House Lannister. Legend says he outwitted the Casterlys to take over Casterly Rock, using nothing but his brain. Some stories claim he used gold, others say he sneaked through secret tunnels, and some even suggest he played ghostly pranks to scare the Casterlys away. Either way, his cleverness laid the foundation for one of the richest and most powerful families in Westeros. Another legendary figure is Garth Greenhand, the supposed ancestor of many southern houses. He's said to have taught the first men how to farm and make the land flourish. His descendants, like the Gardeners of the Reach, claimed his bloodline, connecting their house directly to the fertility of the land. Whether or not Garth was real, his name lived on in the great noble families who shaped the South. But the Age of Heroes wasn't just about building and trickery. The Long Night cast a shadow over the world, bringing a winter that lasted a generation. During this time, the White Walkers rose from the far north, leading armies of the dead and plunging the world into chaos. Humanity barely survived, but the first men, the children of the forest, and even the giants united to push them back. That desperate alliance led to the creation of the Wall, sealing off the north and founding the Night's Watch to guard it. The Night's Watch became a brotherhood, sworn to defend the realms of men from whatever lay beyond. They took no wives, held no lands, and served for life, standing as the first and last line of defense. Even after the White Walkers faded into myth, the Wall and the Watch stood, a lasting symbol of the horrors faced during the Long Night. This age built the legends, the castles, and the ancient orders that shaped Westeros into the world that later generations inherited. Its echoes stretch all the way through the Game of Thrones story. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe for more Game of Thrones content. Anyways, the Andal invasion. About 6,000 years before Aegon's conquest, everything shifted again when the Andals arrived from across the Narrow Sea. These people weren't just looking to settle. They stormed into Westeros armed with iron weapons, something the First Men just couldn't match with their bronze gear. The Andals came in waves, landing first in the Vale, where they quickly overwhelmed the local rulers and started spreading out. But the Andals didn't just bring sharper swords, they brought a new religion, the Faith of the Seven. This faith replaced the worship of the old gods in most parts of Westeros. The Septs, the Seven-Pointed Star, and the orders like the Faith Militant all trace their roots to this massive cultural shift. The Andals believed in 7 aspects of one god: the Father, the Mother, the Warrior, the Maiden, the Smith, the Crone, and the Stranger. They pushed this faith hard, building septs and crowning kings who would swear loyalty to the Seven. Their iron blades and new faith allowed the Andals to conquer most of Westeros. The Vale, the Riverlands, the Westerlands, the Reach, the Stormlands, and even parts of Dorne all fell under Andal influence. Old First Men's houses either fell, bent the knee, or merged bloodlines with the invaders. Many of the great houses that rose to power during this time, like House Arryn, claimed Andal ancestry, connecting themselves directly to the conquerors. But the North held out. The Stark kings, ruling from Winterfell, were too strong and too far for the Andals to conquer. The North stayed tied to the old gods, the Weirwoods, and the traditions of the First Men. The Neck, with its marshes and the cunning crannogmen, also helped block the Andal advance. Because of this, the North remained culturally distinct, holding on to its ancient ways while the South embraced the Andal customs. The Andal invasion permanently reshaped Westeros. The Faith of the Seven became the dominant religion in the South. The old gods were pushed back into the North and the beyond, and the political landscape shifted into something closer to the world seen in Game of Thrones. Castles were rebuilt or strengthened, Andal families rose to prominence, and the lore of the Seven worked its way into every corner of life south of the Neck. This wave of conquest and cultural change didn't just wipe out the past, it layered on top of it, creating a world where the old and the new sat uneasily together. The Andal invasion set the stage for the future struggles and alliances that would shape the Seven Kingdoms for centuries to come. The Rhoynar migration. Around 1,000 years before Aegon's conquest, the Rhoynar people fled their homelands along the Rhoyne River in Essos after devastating defeats by the Valyrian Freehold. The legendary figure here is Princess Nymeria, a brilliant and determined leader who commanded a fleet of 10,000 ships, carrying the surviving Rhoynar across the Narrow Sea in search of a new home. Nymeria's journey was no easy sail. She and her people tried settling in several places, including the Summer Islands and the Basilisk Isles, but they faced trouble everywhere. Eventually, they landed in Dorne, the arid, sun-baked southernmost region of Westeros. There, Nymeria forged a powerful alliance with House Martell, one of the major local houses. She married Lord Mors Martell, combining Rhoynar strength with Martell leadership. This alliance didn't just survive, it reshaped Dorne completely. The arrival of the Rhoynar brought major cultural changes. They came from a civilization that valued gender equality, water magic, and a very different style of governance. Nymeria insisted on burning her fleet once they reached Dorne, signaling that the Rhoynar weren't looking back. Together, Nymeria and Mors united Dorne under Martell rule, bringing together the native Dornish and the Rhoynar refugees into one strong, defiant realm. Dorne's culture became unique within Westeros. Where the rest of the continent followed Andal traditions and the Faith of the Seven, Dorne mixed Rhoynish customs with local ways. Dornish laws, for example, allowed equal inheritance for women, something unheard of in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. Their clothing, architecture, and even combat styles showed clear Rhoynar influence, setting them apart visually and politically. Thanks to Nymeria's leadership, Dorne stood strong and independent for centuries, resisting conquest by outsiders. The Martells ruled as princes and princesses of Dorne, not just lords and ladies, reflecting their distinct heritage. Even after Aegon's conquest, Dorne stayed unconquered for nearly 200 years, only joining the realm through marriage, not war. The Rhoynar migration wasn't just a desperate escape, it was a transformation. The arrival of these people reshaped the politics, culture, and identity of Dorne, turning it into one of the most distinct regions of Westeros. Without Nymeria and her 10,000 ships, Dorne wouldn't have become the fierce, proud land that stood apart from the rest of the realm for so long. This moment in history added yet another layer of complexity to the already tangled web of Westeros: the Valyrian Freehold and Doom. About 1,000 to 100 years before Aegon's conquest, the Valyrian Freehold dominated the known world. These were no ordinary conquerors. They were dragon lords, riding massive beasts that bent nations to their will. The Valyrians started as humble shepherds, but once they discovered dragons in the volcanic mountains of Valyria, everything changed. They tamed the beasts, mastered sorcery, and built a sprawling empire stretching across Essos, crushing rivals like Old Gis and controlling trade, wealth, and power. The Valyrian Freehold was run by noble families, each competing for influence, and they ruled through a mix of military might, dragon power, and dark magic. Their capital, Valyria, was a city of towering wonders, marble palaces, and strange sorceries. But despite their strength, they weren't invincible. Some families, like the Targaryens, sensed something was wrong. About a century before the Doom, the Targaryens left Valyria and settled on the island of Dragonstone, a rocky outpost off the coast of Westeros. Many saw them as minor players compared to the great Valyrian houses, but that choice would save their line. Then came the Doom. In a single cataclysmic event, Valyria was obliterated. The ground split open, volcanoes erupted, the earth trembled, and the mighty city was wiped from the map. Thousands of years of knowledge, magic, and power vanished almost overnight. The Valyrian roads crumbled, the dragons of other families perished, and the empire fractured into scattered, warring colonies. Dragonstone, left untouched, became the last Valyrian stronghold, with House Targaryen as its rulers. The Targaryens kept their dragons, though these magnificent creatures began to dwindle over time, their magic slowly fading from the world. Across Westeros and Essos, the loss of Valyria meant the loss of centuries of magical knowledge. Sorcery grew weaker, legends replaced living memory, and much of what the Valyrians had achieved became myth. The Doom reshaped global power. Without Valyria, Essos fell into chaos, with the free cities scrambling for dominance. Westeros, meanwhile, remained mostly isolated from the disaster, but the presence of the Targaryens on Dragonstone planted the seeds for future conquest. This rise and fall of Valyria wasn't just the story of an empire, it was the story of how an entire era of magic, dragons, and dominance came crashing down, leaving behind only remnants. The Targaryens, perched on Dragonstone, were the last thread connecting Westeros to the shattered greatness of Valyria, a thread that would soon change history forever. Aegon's conquest. In the year zero Aegon's conquest, Aegon Targaryen launched the campaign that reshaped Westeros forever. From Dragonstone, Aegon and his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, unleashed their three dragons, Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes, and set out to unite the continent under Targaryen rule. They didn't come with a massive army, but they came with firepower no Westerosi kingdom could match. Before Aegon, Westeros was divided into 7 independent kingdoms, each ruled by its own king. But that didn't last long. Aegon's campaign was brutal and brilliant. The Riverlands fell first when House Hoare's great fortress, Harrenhal, burned under Balerion's flames, turning the tallest towers into melted ruins. The Stormlands followed after the defeat of Argilac the Arrogant, whose offer of marriage Aegon famously rejected. The Reach and the Rock joined after the Field of Fire, where Aegon unleashed all 3 dragons on a combined army of House Gardener and House Lannister. The flames tore through thousands of men, ending House Gardener and cementing House Tyrell as the new rulers of the Reach under Targaryen authority. In the Vale, little resistance came once Princess Shera Aaron saw the power of the dragons. She bent the knee to protect her young son, handing over the kingdom without a battle. Dorne, though, resisted fiercely. Aegon never fully conquered Dorne during his lifetime, and the Martells remained independent, holding out through guerrilla tactics and sheer determination. The North submitted after Torrhen Stark, called the King Who Knelt, wisely avoided destruction by bending the knee instead of facing dragonfire. Once the conquest was complete, Aegon declared himself the first king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, ruling over the unified realm, except for stubborn Dorne. To symbolize his new power, Aegon forged the Iron Throne, a brutal chair made from the swords of his enemies, melted by Balerion's breath. It wasn't some polished royal seat, it was jagged, uneven, and dangerous, a constant reminder that the throne was won by fire and blood. The creation of the Iron Throne wasn't just symbolic, it became the very center of Westerosi power, where the Targaryen dynasty would rule for nearly 300 years. Aegon's conquest marked the beginning of the Targaryen era, where dragons soared over Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms, once divided and warring, were bound under one banner. This conquest didn't just change the map, it rewrote history, forging a legacy that would echo through every conflict, rebellion, and political game that followed. The Targaryen dynasty. From year 1 to 283 Aegon's conquest, the Targaryens ruled Westeros. But it wasn't smooth sailing. At first, their dragons and Valyrian blood kept them powerful, but over time, internal conflicts and rebellions chipped away at their strength. One of the most devastating events was the Dance of the Dragons, a brutal civil war between rival Targaryen factions. It was a bloody dragon against dragon conflict between Rhaenyra Targaryen and her half-brother Aegon II, both claiming the Iron Throne after King Viserys I died. The war wiped out most of the family's dragons and tore the realm apart, leaving the Targaryens far weaker. The dance wasn't just a power struggle. It marked the beginning of the end for the dragons, which had once been the house's ultimate weapon. Later came the Blackfyre rebellions. These were a series of uprisings led by House Blackfyre, a bastard branch of the Targaryen family founded when Aegon IV legitimized his bastard son Daemon and gave him the sword Blackfyre. That move split loyalties, creating generations of rebellion as the Blackfyre pretenders tried to claim the throne. Though the Targaryens held on, the repeated wars drained resources, weakened royal authority, and sowed deep mistrust across the realm. The dynasty's final chapter came with Aerys II, the Mad King. At first, Aerys showed promise, but over time his rule turned dark and paranoid. He grew obsessed with wildfire, saw betrayal everywhere, and earned his infamous nickname by ruling through cruelty and fear. His reign sparked Robert's rebellion after he demanded the deaths of Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark, following the supposed kidnapping of Lyanna Stark by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Robert's rebellion erupted into a massive civil war. The Targaryens lost key allies. Rhaegar fell at the Battle of the Trident, and King's Landing was eventually sacked when Tywin Lannister turned against the crown. Jaime Lannister, a member of the Kingsguard, famously killed Aerys, earning the name Kingslayer and ending the Targaryen dynasty. The fall of House Targaryen wasn't just the loss of a throne, it was the collapse of a centuries-long legacy, marked by dragons, conquests, and an increasingly fragile grip on power. From the height of Aegon's rule to the smoldering ruins of King's Landing, the Targaryen story was one of fire, blood, and the slow, painful unraveling of a dynasty that once seemed unstoppable, Robert's Rebellion. In the years 282 to 283 Aegon's conquest, the entire realm was thrown into chaos as Robert Baratheon, Eddard Stark, and Jon Arryn rose up to overthrow the centuries-old Targaryen dynasty. What kicked it off was Prince Rhaegar Targaryen's supposed kidnapping of Lyanna Stark, Eddard's sister, and Robert's betrothed. This wasn't just a personal insult, it was political dynamite. When King Aerys II demanded the heads of Robert and Eddard, the rebellion ignited. The major houses quickly picked sides. House Baratheon, House Stark, and House Arryn formed the rebellion's backbone, while the Targaryens still held loyalty from the Reach, the Westerlands, and the Crownlands. Major battles erupted across Westeros, with Robert proving himself as a ferocious warrior, cutting down Prince Rhaegar at the Battle of the Trident in one of the rebellion's most decisive moments. While Robert's forces pushed toward victory, political betrayal sealed the Targaryen fate. Tywin Lannister, who had stayed out of the fight, marched on King's Landing under the pretense of loyalty, only to sack the city once inside. In the chaos, Jaime Lannister, sworn to protect the king as a Kingsguard, turned on Aerys and killed him, ending the Mad King's life and the dynasty's rule. Meanwhile, Queen Rhaella and young Viserys fled across the sea, and Daenerys Targaryen was born during the storm at Dragonstone, marking the last flicker of the Targaryen line in Westeros. Back home, Robert Baratheon took the throne, crowning himself king and marrying Cersei Lannister to cement the new alliance with the powerful Westerlands. Robert's rebellion didn't just remove the Targaryens, it reshaped the political map, setting up the uneasy alliances, bitter grudges, and family tensions that would ripple through Westeros for years to come. The rebellion shattered old loyalties, raised new kings, and left the realm scarred, both physically and politically. Though Robert sat the Iron Throne, the cost of rebellion left deep wounds that would haunt the Seven Kingdoms long after the banners were lowered and the swords were sheathed. The War of the Five Kings, From the years 298 to 300 Aegon's conquest, Westeros plunged into brutal chaos as multiple claimants rose up, each declaring themselves king and throwing the realm into a massive civil war. It all started after the death of King Robert Baratheon, which cracked open old rivalries and fresh ambitions like a smashed wine barrel. First, there was Joffrey Baratheon, Robert's supposed son, sitting on the Iron Throne under the control of House Lannister. Then came Stannis Baratheon, Robert's elder brother, claiming Joffrey was illegitimate and that the crown belonged to him. Renly Baratheon, the younger brother, decided he wanted the throne too, backed by the powerful Tyrells. In the north, Robb Stark declared himself king in the north after the execution of Eddard Stark, seeking independence, not the Iron Throne. And in the Riverlands, Balon Greyjoy threw his hat into the chaos, declaring himself king of the Isles in the north, launching raids along the western coast. The fighting spread everywhere, battles in the Riverlands, sieges on key strongholds, and shifting alliances. One by one, the rival kings fell. Renly was assassinated under suspicious, shadowy circumstances, leaving his bannermen to either scatter or join Stannis. Stannis launched a desperate assault on King's Landing but was crushed in the Battle of the Blackwater, where Tyrion Lannister's wildfire trap turned the bay into an inferno. Robb Stark, winning brilliant battles in the field, was ultimately betrayed and slaughtered at the Red Wedding, orchestrated by House Frey and House Bolton, with Lannister backing. Balon Greyjoy's ambitions faded as his rebellion stalled, leaving the Iron Islands isolated once again. In the end, it was House Lannister who emerged on top, with Tywin Lannister pulling the strings and cementing control through brutal deals and calculated alliances. The Lannisters tightened their grip over the Seven Kingdoms, with Joffrey on the throne, followed later by his younger brother Tommen after Joffrey's shocking death. The War of the Five Kings wasn't just about battles, it was about the breaking and reshaping of power. Old houses rose and fell, alliances shifted like sand, and the realm was left deeply fractured and exhausted. House Lannister gained dominance, but it came at the cost of trust, stability, and countless lives. The scars of this war ran deep, setting the stage for even darker storms on the horizon. The return of the Targaryens, the Great War, and the aftermath. From 300 to 305 Aegon's conquest and beyond, the world of Westeros was shaken by the dramatic rise and fall of Daenerys Targaryen. Across the sea in Essos, Daenerys started with nothing but grit and 3 newly hatched dragons, slowly building an army by freeing the Unsullied, breaking chains in Slaver's Bay, and gathering a powerful coalition determined to reclaim the Iron Throne. Back in Westeros, darker forces stirred. The White Walkers, long believed to be ancient legend, surged south with their army of the dead, led by the terrifying Night King. Jon Snow, resurrected by Melisandre after his betrayal at the Wall, rose as a key leader, rallying the North, the Wildlings, and eventually teaming up with Daenerys. Together, they faced the ultimate threat at the Battle of Winterfell. Dragons, armies, and magic clashed in a brutal night of blood and ice, ending when Arya Stark drove her dagger into the Night King, shattering him and breaking the dead's power. But victory in the Great War didn't bring peace. Daenerys turned her sights on King's Landing, where Cersei Lannister still held the throne. Despite the city's surrender, Daenerys unleashed Drogon, burning King's Landing to the ground in a fiery rampage, killing countless civilians and shocking allies and enemies alike. Seeing the danger she now posed, Jon Snow made the devastating choice to stop her. In a quiet, tragic moment, Jon killed Daenerys before the Iron Throne, ending her dream of a new world, and leaving Drogon to fly away with her body, melting the Iron Throne into molten ruin. With the Targaryen claim shattered and the realm in chaos, the surviving leaders gathered in King's Landing to choose a new ruler. They elected Bran Stark, now known as Bran the Broken, as King of the Six Kingdoms, with Sansa Stark declaring the North an independent realm and taking her place as Queen in the North. Tyrion Lannister, despite his many failures, was named Hand of the King, tasked with helping rebuild a realm left in ruins by years of war. Jon Snow, broken by what he had done, was sent back to the Night's Watch, returning to the Wall and heading into the far north, leaving behind the world of thrones and crowns. This new fragile peace, built on the ashes of rebellion, conquest, and ancient threats, offered Westeros a rare chance to heal after generations of violence. But the scars of war ran deep, and the future of the realm remained as uncertain as ever. That's every major era of Game of Thrones broken down, from the dawn of the world to the fight for the throne. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Westeros history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more awesome content. Got a favorite era or moment? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.